It's the Get Foxy show. Today's guest is the lovely Mary Hyatt. Mary, thank you so much for taking the time today to chat with us. I sure appreciate what you're doing. You are a business and life coach who specializes in working with mindsets and helping women achieve big things in life. Thank you for being here.
Thanks, Terry. I am so excited to be here.
Now, you are a very multifaceted kind of person. You're a yoga instructor, you're
Yep.
a hypnotherapist, you're a life coach, you are very knowledgeable about essential oils.
Yep.
How did you discover your strengths? Did these things just kind of fall in your lap, or how did this all come about for you?
It's so fascinating. I think like when you hear somebody's resume or their bio and you're like, wow, like they're an expert at, XYZ or whatever. And yet, at least for me, which I would imagine this is true for most people, it's like this journey along the way where you start picking up these interests and facets of what is drawing your attention. And for me, it was all from my own personal healing journey. And if we were to rewind the clock like 8 years ago, you would have met a very different Mary. I was about 80 pounds heavier than I am now. I was dealing with like really extreme anxiety and depression. I was in a marriage that was just not healthy and not ultimately life giving. And I really had no sense of purpose, no sense of identity, and was dealing with autoimmune stuff. So it was like, the culmination of somebody who has totally just lost themselves. And I was almost like sleepwalking through life, is what it felt like. And so there was this moment I can remember so clearly where it was like, okay, either this is going to go to a bad place really, really quickly. And it was already kind of spiraling and getting to that point, or there's got to be more to life than this. Like, surely, there was like this little flicker of hope. Like, surely there's more to life than this. And thank God I listened to that voice of there's more here, and started this journey of self-discovery and started to come into what made me come alive and authentic, and learning about myself and learning about my own femininity and my own just essence as a woman. And so little by little, I started kind of adding these different tools to my toolbox, that allowed me to do my own work further. And then ultimately, as a life coach now, be able to give that gift as medicine to other women who've been on this similar journey. So it's kind of like my own work that now gets to be given to others.
Your podcast, I've tuned into a couple of episodes. You're actually right now at the time of this recording, your theme for the month is femininity.
Yeah. How
And
perfect.
that was that was one of the reasons when I was like, okay, wow, when we're here on the Get Foxy show, that's one of the things that I felt like I wanted to do for my listeners was to help them learn more about cultivating and amplifying their own divinely given femininity.
Yeah.
And so I'm like, oh, Mary, she's a lady that needs to be on this show. So what have you been
Yeah.
discussing on your podcast over the last couple of weeks?
Oh my gosh, it's so juicy. It's like literally my favorite month so far. And I feel like every month we talk about just amazing topics around self discovery and mindset. And so to end um, the year as we're recording this in this topic of femininity is so beautiful because there's all different ways of looking at it. I mean, the reality is that this concept of femininity in and of itself is deep. There's a lot of different ways you could approach it. And so on the podcast, we're looking at that. We're looking at how do you personally define your own femininity? Because we're getting all these messages from diet culture, from the fashion industry, from the porn industry on what it is to be a woman. You have to look a certain way, you have to behave a certain way. Even on Google, like the definition of femininity is like agreeable and pleasing and cooperative and quiet. And it's just this outdated, one-dimensional definition of what it is to be a woman. So on the show, we're getting to explore like, okay, if I could look at the totality of myself as a woman, the essence of what makes me divinely female, what does that even look like? How do I even begin to experience her? And not just from what I've been told from childhood or religion or culturally. I know that especially now it's even tricky because we are more out there than ever as women, and we're working, we're raising children, we are in unconventional relationships, we are in a way trying to do it all, and it's exhausting us. I mean, it's really depleting us. It's burning us out. And so it's still trying to figure out, okay, how do I define this in a new way that isn't like in the confines of masculinity? Like, I don't have to work like a man. I don't have to produce like a man or achieve like a man. What does it look like to do that as a woman? So those are kind of the surface level things that we're talking about on the show. And then we're getting into all the fun woo-woo stuff about your menstrual cycle and the moon cycle and astrology and archetypes. So it's like real a wide range of different lenses in looking at femininity.
That's fantastic.
Yeah.
I will put a link in the show notes to that specific episode, and it's one of the episodes that I tuned into. So I mean,
Cool.
it,
Yeah.
you guys are talking some very fascinating stuff. You mentioned how in our culture we're to a point now where women are trying to do so much
Yeah.
and wear so many different hats that they're beginning to experience or have already experienced burnout.
Mm-hmm.
How do you help someone recover from this and really kind of start embracing taking care of themselves?
I think I just exhale because I'm like, it really is something that is so prevalent right now, that just depletion, that deprivation of self care and taking care of the needs that we have. And it's bred in us, almost taught to us from a very early age to give and give and give and give and be yes women, to be people pleasers, to do it all. Then you mix that in with like, okay, now I'm feeling liberated and I'm feeling independent. And so I want to achieve all of these things and be the best version of myself. And the reality is that no human, male or female, can keep up with that kind of 24/7 all in kind of demand for their lives. And so to me, when we can begin to look at, first of all, where am I feeling deprived? Like, I think we kind of have to almost diagnose the situation first and figure out where we're feeling exhausted, what's exhausted in our lives, and get really honest first and foremost about what's draining us, what's siphoning off our energy, because no amount of self-care can sort of cover up when we keep in the same patterns that are going to deplete us. Like, that piece has to shift in order to experience something different. And so first is identifying, where am I at? From a scale of 1 to 10 on the burnout scale, where am I? Am I handling it? Am I functioning? Am I barely functioning? Am I to the point where I feel like I could have a mental breakdown and blow up at any moment, which I feel like a lot of us are at that place. It's like the COVID fatigue, the 2020 fatigue is really setting in, and our bandwidth is not what it normally would be. And so I think that's sort of the first step, is going, okay, I'm I'm really exhausted here. I'm struggling. And from that place, then we can look at, okay, what needs to shift? And starting to identify those warning signs that come into play that are ever so gently to the point where it's that little twinge of this is too much. And we say yes. And then, oop, I'm overcommitted. And then we say yes some more. And then to the point eventually where most of us get total burnout is where it's like our body is shutting down, our adrenals are shot, our cortisol levels are depleted, our vitamin D is depleted, like everything within our physical bodies, emotionally and just from a health standpoint is gone, like the reserve is gone. So that's kind of like the level 10 on that scale. So let's look at where are we at so that then we can think about recovery, replenishment, and rejuvenation from a very holistic point of view.
From what I'm hearing from you, the initial step is uh, a truth telling to
Yeah.
yourself, that, okay, yes, I'm actually feeling burnt out. I am feeling worn thin.
Yep.
And I think there are a lot of us in our culture that deny that, that go, okay, well, yeah, I'll be okay. I can push it a little further. It's all right. It's fine. It's fine. It'll be okay. I can do more.
Yeah.
And that truth telling of, no, I'm not
Yeah.
fine. I'm not fine right now. And why is that?
Hmm.
That sounds like that's a big first step.
It's huge and it's really brave. I mean, it's vulnerable. I mean, I think admitting, I'm from Nashville, Tennessee. So in the South, we call it a come to Jesus moment. And it's like, okay, here we are. This is, ground zero. And admitting the hell out of where you're at is to me so brave. And it is the starting place. Like you think about any kind of recovery, it's the first step in any 12-step program is to admit that my life has become unmanageable. And so even from the wisdom of like the 12-step program, we can really learn whether you have any kind of work with that or any addiction issues. I mean, workaholism is an addiction in and of itself, but even just that people pleasing, codependency, saying yes, making sure everybody's needs come before our own, we have to recognize, my life has become unmanageable. I can't keep doing this. Like I can't keep the plate spinning in the air. They're going to drop at some point or they're dropping. And I think this the nuance to this, and this is a very feminine way of approaching it, is when we can meet ourselves in honesty, we also have to extend ourselves a lot of compassion, a lot of tenderness, a lot of like if any of our sweet friends would be with us in that moment where they would admit to us like my life has become unmanageable, we would meet them from a place of deep loving, like, oh God, I'm so sorry. What do you need? And for us to be able to meet ourselves with that same compassion, not more judgment, not more guilt, not more shame, like here I am, I can't handle it, I can't get together. Everybody else seems to be able to function and I can't. Um, that tenderness to me, that compassion is revolutionary and it's very, very feminine. So it's an invitation to meet ourselves with a lot of kindness as well.
Yes, indeed. Dr. Jordan Peterson, in his book 12 Rules for Life, talks about treating ourselves the way that we would treat someone we love, or even treating ourselves like a pet that we
Yeah.
love. You
Yeah.
know?
Yeah,
If I
totally.
would
Like
just treat
how much
myself,
love do you give a pet?
and
I
so
love that.
that's a great way to frame it, I think, because
Yeah.
if we can treat ourselves the way that we would treat our pets, oh my gosh, how much love, compassion, forgiveness, and patience would we have for ourselves?
Mm. So beautiful. I love just thinking about it like that. I've always sort of thought about it like treating yourself like a child, doing that inner child work of really loving on yourself like you're a little girl or a little boy, and just that I see you. I hear that you're hurting. I hear that you're tired. Like you would never tell a little kid who was tired, like, suck it up and come on. You'd say, okay, it's time for a nap. And so I think about that, sort of giving ourselves that same sweetness that we would give a little child. But the whole pet thing, it's like, that's even more like we're, you know, pets have it made. You know what I mean? It's perfect.
Yes, indeed. Well, we've talked a little bit about, recognizing the signs of burnout. Now, engaging in self-care. What exactly do you mean by self-care? I think there's some nuances there. What is your
Yeah.
definition of self-care?
You know, I'll start with what I feel like it's not. And it's sort of this commercialized definition of self care, which is pedicures, bubble baths, champagne, wine time. That is, to me, sort of a shallow, lower level type of self care. And to me, that's more like there's some pleasure there, which is beautiful. Self care can include pleasure, but when I think about self care, I think about tending to the self, really slowing down to ask ourselves, what do I need? What do I need? And that is a question that with my one-on-one coaching clients, even I have a membership for women, and it's a question I ask in the membership all the time, a regular inquiry of what do I need? And it starts with that. I mean, self care begins with tapping in, tuning into the needs that we have. And to me, oftentimes it looks like making hard decisions as an advocate for ourselves. So, self care for me is saying no more than I'm saying yes. Self care for me is learning how to have really healthy boundaries with my time. So, as an entrepreneur and working with women who are high achieving, this is one of those pieces to self care that we implement first, which is boundaries on not working after a certain time, not working on the weekends, really giving yourself that time to rest on the weekend and in the evenings. It's tuning into the body. Self care is also about that holistic view of health. Do I need to move today? Is my body asking to stretch, to dance, to sweat? Or maybe my body in the self care is asking not to do those things. Maybe it needs a day off from the gym. Maybe it needs to sleep in. Maybe self care is drinking more water. I mean, it's really not that sexy. It's like it's attending to the needs that each of us have as human beings and thinking of it like if I were in true advocacy for myself, if the highest version of myself could come in and say, all right, in order to get through this day, this week, this month, here's what we have to focus on, prioritize, make space for. And so that to me is self-care. And yes, sometimes that includes a bath and sometimes that includes a pedicure, but it's not these cheap sort of hits. It's really some of that deeper work of taking care of ourselves.
I agree 100%. You are preaching to the choir.
Yeah.
I totally believe there is a massive difference between self-indulgence and
Yeah.
self-care. And you
Yes,
can you
totally.
can have a little self-indulgence, that's okay.
Yeah.
But there is a difference there in what's truly restorative and nourishing
Yeah.
to the body and to the mind and to the spirit. And self-indulgence plays a little part in that, but it's not the whole picture.
Right. Well, it can very easily turn into numbing or coping. So like you might think, not that there's anything wrong with Netflix because who doesn't love a good binge, but if that's kind of the only version of self-care you have is starting with coffee and ending with wine over, 8 episodes of some series, that isn't life-giving to you. I mean, it is actually another way of checking out and disassociating. And it's not care, it's numbing, it's coping, just like you would with food or chocolate or just hours on social media surfing. And so I think that's kind of where we can tap in to go, is this a way for me to check out? Or is this actually filling my tank back up? And to me, self care is I leave whatever that is, that thing that I've done or that choice that I've made with more energy than I had, or setting myself up to be less depleted versus just sort of masking it or covering up that exhaustion. So I think it's important to think about it in that way as well, as is this numbing, is this coping, or is this truly self-care?
How does one really start to engage in self-care?
I think that it begins with like kind of what we were mentioning first, identifying where we're at, taking that inventory, that self inquiry to ask ourselves, what is it that we need? And then I like to set the bar really, really low. So, oftentimes, if we have a list of self care that includes things that require extra effort, when we're at our most depleted state, when we're really tired, the times when we need self care from a recovery standpoint versus sort of like preventative, then we have to make the bar so low that it's almost effortless. So, one of the things that I have my clients do is to create a list of either 10 to 20 different ways that they could show themselves love, kindness, replenishment, nourishment, any kind of self care goes on that list. And what's helpful about that is that in that moment, when you've identified, hey, I need something here, then it's easy to look at that list and find something without having to bring that out from the brain when the brain's tired. So it's sort of like your cheat sheet and your roadmap to some self care. So I would encourage anyone to take time, maybe on a Saturday morning or a Sunday morning, and just jot out in a journal 10 to 20 things that you could easily do. So, phoning a friend, texting your therapist, even things that are really comforting from a embodiment kind of practice lens, like a easy stretch or a 3-minute breathing technique that gives you energy or calms your anxiety, like not a 20-minute meditation, not an hour-long meditation, but these little almost like short quick wins, and identifying what of those feel the easiest, like out of those 10 to 20, star 3 or 4 that are like you could almost do it in your sleep. And that way you'll have this ability to choose one of these things without a lot of energy to do that. And then as you start kind of filling back your tank, I think it's great to start identifying some of those self care routines that you want to implement regularly, daily for yourself, that are more preventative, that sort of keep you out of that level 10 of burnout and help you stay together, emotionally grounded, hydrated, whatever it might be, so that you have this ongoing plan of taking care of yourself that is more of that long-term kind of approach, as opposed to in the moment we're in a crisis, we need to pull out that list. So it's sort of twofold, the list, and then also what would I need to do every day that would give me energy, help me stay centered and aligned long term.
I get the feeling that you've seen some pretty amazing transformations
Yeah.
in your clients.
Oh yeah. It
Who
is amazing to witness.
I'd like to hear a little bit about the transformation that just kind of blew your mind.
Yes. Okay. So one woman comes to mind. She was a C-suite executive, high powered, just like knocking it out of the park. Very accomplished woman, which is some of my favorite people to work with when they come to me, because there is a desire they already have to, okay, I'm accomplished, but something in my life is missing. Like something is just unfulfilling. in the work that I'm doing. And yet, clearly, they're highly resourceful women. So, this one client, she was in this season of desiring more for her life. She wanted to connect with her femininity. And I'll give you the picture in your mind, because it's almost less about like what she did and more about the transformation that experience. So when I met her, and I do all my calls on Zoom, so I get to see my clients through the screen, she had a really tight bun, like very slicked back hair. You could tell she was very rigid in her physical body. She was very linear, and her energy was very masculine, very much like, boom, 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 boom. And with my clients, I give them the option to do each session 60 minutes or 90 minutes. And without fail, the women who are operating out of their masculinity, 60 minutes, they're watching their clock, ding, it's up. Okay, next meeting, they have to go. So through her transformation process, we did a lot of work around connecting back with her femininity, like connecting back to the parts of her that were feminine and yet still powerful, feminine and still in a state of achieving, but she was able to create so much margin in her life. She stopped working on the weekends. She stopped working at night, so she gained back tremendous amount of time to her schedule. She was able to connect with her sensuality and her sexuality, which was so beautiful to see a woman who was in always sort of the driver's seat, controlling, to move into this space of receptivity, to move into this space of allowing, of trusting. It showed up in her relationships with her employees big time. She was able to delegate so much more because she wasn't strangling, right? Like she wasn't strangling everything. She wasn't micromanaging everything. She was able to release and really enter into the things that made her come alive, the things that were her sweet spot, the things that she was just naturally gifted at. And her business grew so much. And I think beyond that, it was like the picture I see now. She has this beautiful natural wavy hair now. She has just changed. Like she's wearing jewelry. Her clothes are more flowing. She's still powerful. Like she's still this exec, but there's a softness to her now. There's a femininity to her now. There's an ease to her now. And I experienced that with so many of my clients, but she really sticks out to me because it was just this beautiful swing from all in her masculinity to embracing this feminine. And now there's just this balance and harmony between the two. It's pretty cool.
I love it.
Yeah.
Love it. How can people find out more about your work and your podcast and all that you offer?
Yeah. So the easiest place to go is maryhyatt.com. And there you will find my podcast, the Living Fully Alive podcast, and all the links. And you'll also be able to find the link to my monthly membership and my social links, Instagram, Facebook, all of that is there as well. So maryhyatt.com.
Excellent. Well, now I have to ask you the question I ask every single one of my guests, Mary, and that is, what does Foxy and being Foxy mean to you?
I, first of all, love this freaking word. It's so perfect. Because to me, it's that little minx, inside of all of us. And it speaks to being turned on for life. And oftentimes I think about, if connecting with our sensuality and our sexuality feels a little bit foreign, we can kind of ease into it by thinking about being turned on for life, where we're present, where we start to see life in 3D and Technicolor. And so Foxy to me is that state, is that being turned on for life and enjoying that experience in each and every moment. So that's what I think of when you say the word Foxy. I love it.
Excellent. Now, of course, we don't feel that way every moment of our lives. So I know there's been times where you probably haven't felt all that foxy. What do
Right.
you do to reclaim that foxiness, return to it?
For me, and this is a lot of the work that I do, is embodiment work. It's getting back into our physical bodies, because when we're stuck in our cognitive brain, it's really hard to get there. I mean, I think the foxiness is in our muscles and our tissues and our fascia. And so for me, that looks like doing workout routines like Kinergy. I don't know if you've heard of that one. It's beautiful. It's like very high vibe, a lot of cardio, but it sort of mixes dance, a lot of tribal elements, very powerful movements of dance and yoga and cardio. And so the quickest way for me is either put on some fun music, get into my body, dance it out, or do some kind of like workout routine like a Kinergy or the class are some of my favorites that I do.
Excellent. And what would be your number one bit of advice to help others tap into that foxiness and stay foxy?
I think that it is knowing what those triggers are to get you there. So, like for me, I think of it like a recipe. So, A plus B equals C. So, the best way that I can describe this is when I was younger and I would have girl nights and I would go out when I was younger and would go drink and have a good night. There was a recipe unconsciously that I was following. Like I would put on some fun music, maybe put on some fun lingerie underneath my clothing, get ready and really just feel myself, like kind of get into that place of confidence. And so for me now in a committed relationship, older woman in my progression from that stage, I'm not going out and drinking on the weekends anymore. But there's still a recipe. So it's like finding in this stage of life what that is to awaken that inside of yourself and write it down. Like get to know what it takes for you to cultivate that inside of yourself. So music for me, always there. Like that is like put on the playlist that gets you going. I've got so many on Spotify for this very reason. So it's identifying your recipe and then going to bake that for yourself.
Beautiful. That's what we need right here is to get ourselves a Get Foxy playlist.
Totally.
I'm going to work on that.
Yes, I love it.
Well, Mary, if you can believe it, our time is up. I have so very much enjoyed chatting with you. Thank you for taking the time for being on the show today. I know you are a busy lady and you're making one heck of a difference out there in the world. So I honor you and thank you for that work. And thank you for being here.
Thanks, Terry. This is so great. I appreciate you.